Kanban is a topic that I think is extremely germane to where we are in the world today, as it is focused on efficiency and lean. The presentation Kanban Can Can is based really on work that we've done at DCG with clients, as well as an implementation my wife and I use to manage two of her startup businesses. So this is something that not only makes a lot of sense in terms of delivering and using it at work to focus on work, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward, but this is definitely one of those things that I recommend that you do try at home, unlike some of the movies that I've seen recently. Kanban is really a mechanism to guide work through a process while minimizing the work in process. And that's a lot of jargon tied up immediately in some words, and we'll pull that apart as we go through this. And, you know, if you've some background in manufacturing or read the Toyota production system, those kinds of things, you'll recognize this, and it'll feel very, very manufacturing oriented because it really is an artifact of the Toyota production system. And it has begun to transition into the software development, software maintenance world as organizations have sought to gain efficiency. It'd be easy to think of Kanban as a fad, especially in terms of IT, other than the fact that it has had such a very storied and is such a significant portion of the manufacturing and the engineering world. So I would suggest that this is not a fad, but an emerging mechanism to add to your quiver of process improvement kinds of techniques. And it is an easy mechanism to apply to almost any IT life cycle, whether you're doing Agile or you're doing any other form of development. So the goal of Kanban is to minimize work in process, but only working on a task that when it's needed in the next step. So things flow. There is no stopping along the way. We'll talk about this as we go through this, but the simple power of this constraint of only working on something when it will be needed so that you get it there just in time is fairly remarkable. If you're really interested in how this works and want to go through a sort of a training game on it, I suggest you go out on the internet and look up the airplane game online. It's an Agile game. You can find that on a number of sites. If you can't, please feel free to contact me and I'll point you at a site for it. And play it with your team, and you'll get your outlook on how work should be done, and that the pace and the speed will fundamentally change for the rest of your lives. And I know that sounds like a very strong statement, but very frankly, it was one of the most eye-opening Gestalt kind of moments that I've ever run into. So what is Kanban? And so history kinds of things. You know, Kanban in Japanese means visual card. It's originally part of the Toyota production system. It was a tool to really to do just-in-time inventory management, to move things along the line and only be working on things as they're needed in the next step. It really focuses on excess inventory as waste, and time spent producing that could be put somewhere else. Now, again, that's going to sound very mechanistic, and we'll look at that and go, well, of course, the things that I'm doing, somebody will need sooner or later. But in reality, what we'll talk about as we go through here are things like feedback loops and bottlenecks, all of which cause trouble, because when things aren't moving, when you wait a long time in terms of waiting for feedback, all sorts of things could have gone wrong in the interim. Things could have changed, and therefore significant amounts of rework need to be done. So excess inventory, when you see that, we'll talk about that as we go through here. Think about that as a representation of a bottleneck in a process. And if you could get rid of that bottleneck in the process, things would move along at a steadier pace and more than likely a faster pace overall. Excess inventory also delays feedback. We talked a little bit about that as I mentioned before, and we'll come back to that. And again, there are all sorts of good, hardcore mathematical proofs in the software and the software product world that can show you how slowing down the feedback loop actually will have detrimental impacts on any project. So usually when you start a discussion about Kanban with any organization or any group of programmers, you get the mantra, but we're doing incremental development. Shouldn't everything be fine? We're doing Agile. It must be right. So why is the focus on Kanban, which is very much a focus on flow through the process? Why is it important? Why is it even a question when we've gone through iteration after iteration of major change process, CMM, CMMI, Agile, all sorts of different pieces of information. I'm currently at the World Computer Conference in Las Vegas, and it's a large conference and very interesting. I was sitting in a session yesterday, and a gentleman put up line by line the failures, the failure statistics from the CAS reports for the past X number of years, line after line after line. And in reality, things haven't fundamentally changed. Now, you can argue with the definition of failure in the CAS report, and that would be an interesting discussion, but the problem is, measured in a consistent fashion, we haven't changed success. So regardless of what we're looking at, we need to continue to look for other mechanisms to make us do better work or get better success. Now, my friends in Agile would say, but our customers are happy. But today, we also have to couple that with efficiency and become more efficient. Because very frankly, just having happy customers doesn't necessarily mean that the goal of the CFO group within the organization isn't going to be to continue to reduce costs, and that may well mean job dislocations. So the mechanism of Kanban gives us a tool. So remember, common sort of time box view of the world, and I'm a big fan of Agile. I've been a big fan of time boxes since the late 1970s, early 1980s, when Hammer and Champy, championed. That's actually pretty funny. The 90-day time box. And again, so time box is not a new thing within IT, something that actually has been developing over time because the mathematics show that shorter feedback loops are an extremely important context. But short time boxes force development items into smaller and smaller chunks. And at the same time, those smaller and smaller chunks are often too small to be valuable in their own right. I would almost suggest that they're also too small to be conceptually understood by the people working on it. So there's a degree of inefficiency that immediately resolves or evolves out of it. Not to say not to do it. We'll talk a little bit about how to keep it at a conceptual level that actually makes sense a little later on. But time boxes aren't the perfect solution to everything. And then the last 3 bullet points on here, the quality of requirements suffers, the quality of current development suffers. All of those really